You probably didn't know this about the Gospel of Mark. Hi, my name is Stan Christopoulos. I like to bring high-level theology and philosophy to the popular level so we can have deep discussions about it. Keeping in step with our Mark and the Chaos Monster series, we just finished seeing how Jesus confronted Satan and demons and how that played a really important theological role in who Jesus is. If you haven't watched those videos in the series yet, I highly recommend you go watch that, as those are going to give you really important context and background information to make sure you really understand what I'm going to be talking about here. We've seen how Jesus' confrontations with Satan and demons in the Gospel of Mark have showcased the divinity of Jesus. And we saw that the theological thought in the background of Mark's Gospel was that of the divine cosmic battle. Satan was the prince of the air, and him and his helpers are the reason why wicked men rule the world and why there's pain and suffering, why sickness pervades. And it's in this same context that we see Mark depicting Jesus doing battle with the sea. And his context is really important because without it, we're going to miss the greater theological motifs going on in Jesus' confrontation with the sea. Think back to our introduction on the Chaos Kampf. The divine warrior is to restore the fallen world and usher back in a fertile and abundant Edenic vision. The motif harkens back to the New Year festival and is now finding a reflex in apocalyptic literature. So Jesus is marching through Israel and waging war on the forces of chaos. So now Mark is switching gears. Instead of depicting Jesus as subduing the devil and his minions, now Mark is depicting Jesus as subduing the sea. As Brendan Graham Dempsey says, quote, "Nature, like all else, is under Satan's dominance, has become distorted and corrupt, working evil rather than harmony for the righteous, and the sea, Yahweh's old enemy, serves as the chief representative of Satan's allies in nature." So, in the articulation of Christ's eschatological rejuvenation, the motif of the raging sea returns as the paramount expression of chaos and disorder in a cosmos under evil kingship. In short, Mark's gospel depicts the sea as the representative of chaos. Therefore, Jesus' victory over the sea represents some of Mark's most explicit use of the Chaos Kampf, and therefore, some of the most explicit theology, pointing again as Jesus as God incarnate, the divine warrior who will defeat all death, suffering, chaos, evil, disorder, and so on. Let us first turn to Mark 4:35 through 41. Commentators on Mark traditionally point to this passage as alluding to the Hebrew Chaos Kampf, so it's generally agreed upon that this is probably one of the most explicit references in Mark's gospel to this motif. As Greg Boyd says, it is as though Yahweh is, in the person of Jesus Christ, once again confronting his archenemy, Yam, in the chaotic and threatening waves of the Sea of Galilee. The sea opens with Jesus suggesting to his disciples a journey across the sea to the opposite shore. They consequently disembark, accompanied, we are told, by a few other boats as well. Just then, however, arises a great tempest of wind, in Greek, laileps megalia nemu, and the waves crashed into the boat, so that the boat fills with water. Like an angry dragon roused from its slumbers, the sea suddenly turned into the familiar destructive entity from Israel's mythic traditions. Lake Gennesaret is now the raging sea, the deep, the roaring waters. So we have the villain of the story established, the sea. And our hero emerges, sorta. Unlike you'd expect, Jesus, instead of jumping into combat with the chaos enemy, is asleep in the stern of a boat. And many commentators have found that detail really perplexing. But a look at Psalm 74 and Isaiah 51, I think, paves the way to understanding this. Psalm 74 reads, "Your foes have roared within your holy place. They set up their emblems there. How long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand? Why do you keep your hand in your bosom? Yet God my King is from of old, working salvation in the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the dragons in the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave them as food for the people in the wilderness. Here we read about the psalmist lamenting about the enemies of Yahweh desecrating the holy place. But Yahweh has yet to come to repurify it. And it's in this same way that we read Isaiah 51, 9-14, which reads, Awake, awake, put on your strength, O arm of Yahweh. Awake as in days of old, the generations of long ago. Was it not you who cut Rahab into pieces, who pierced the dragon? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a road for the redeemed to cross over? So the ransomed of Yahweh shall return, and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. I am he who comforts you. Why then are you afraid of a mere mortal who must die, a human being who fades like grass? You have forgotten Yahweh your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth. Your fear continually all day long because of the fury of the oppressor, who is bent on destruction. But where is the fury of the oppressor? This thematic idea resonates in Mark's gospel. If God has been in wait or in slumber, he's certainly awake now. And to further emphasize this point and this parallel in Mark's gospel, Mark emphasizes the waking up of Jesus. Verse 38 says that the disciples woke him up, egerisun afton, and then, having been woken up, he addresses the raging sea. That whole idea of they're waking him up and then him having been woken up might seem kind of redundant, but Mark is probably using this to serve his theological point. God's people have been suffering for centuries. This is the moment, the time of Jesus' ministry, when God is finally woken up and heard his people's calls to defeat the chaos monsters. The question, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing, is the question Jews had been asking of God for generations. So Mark depicts Jesus now answering the question once and for all. His response to his disciples at the close of the scene, "Why are you afraid?" seems to be a direct reference to Isaiah 51, where Yahweh himself asks, "Why then are you afraid?" and derides his people for their fear and lack of faith. The calming of the storm in Mark, then, is a clear and dramatic enactment of Isaiah's promise. Yahweh has awoken, defeated the dragon. Why are you doubting? Again, likening and blurring the lines between Jesus and God. After this, Jesus engages the sea in the same way that Yahweh has in the Hebrew Bible, his rebuke. And we saw this theme in the last video with Jesus facing the demon in Capernaum. Jesus rebukes the tempest wind and then, remarkably, speaks to the wind. The Greek reads "ipen ti thalassa," commanding it to be silent and bound in a muzzle. The Greek here being "sophia bephimisu." Thus, like Yahweh, he uses his mighty voice to bring the sea into obedient submission. And remember, both in Ugaritic and Israelite Chaos Kampf traditions, being bound with a muzzle was the fate of the defeated chaos monster. In fact, the same progression of rebuking and muzzling was used on the demoniac in Mark 1. Here, they are found in a situation more at home to their origins in the combat myth. Yahweh rebuked and bound the sea with a muzzle, and so too does Jesus. In conclusion, in Mark's gospel, Jesus' confrontation with the sea isn't simply a miracle. This is a profound theological declaration of who Jesus is. It's an assertion of Jesus' divine authority over the cosmic forces of evil and his identity as God incarnate. As always, thank you for watching the video. Please leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe, and just a friendly reminder to please consider being a Patreon supporter so that way I can keep making videos like this.